Okay, welcome and thank you for joining us for another irrigation training from Jane Irrigation. I'm Richard Restucia, Vice President of Water Management Solutions, and today we're going to be talking about hemp. It's part two of our three-part series. You can see part one recorded at our website at the webinar series irrigation training area. You can see it there, and hemp's been so popular for a couple reasons, I think. One, and first and foremost, you know, everybody's heard the story of the $100,000 or $120,000 per acre rewards that some growers are getting, but we've probably also seen or heard about as many disasters as we hear the great successes. And I think one of the challenges with hemp and hemp growing is that it's not a crop that people have been growing for the last 100 years. We don't have a lot documented on it. We don't really know and have the experience that we have with other crops. So today we're really fortunate to have Kevin Stewart back. Kevin's the Director of Ag Sales for Jane Irrigation, and Kevin's got a lot of experience in agriculture in general, but he was also one of the first people to start consulting in this hemp area for irrigation. And as a result, having a few years experience in hemp has actually helped him develop really good expertise in the area. So we're really excited to hear about hemp and the part two in the series. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Kevin. Kevin, welcome.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate the time and the platform to share with this audience a little bit more about hemp and what we're learning. And you know, it seems like you know, it was just the other day that we were talking about hemp, when it was really, you know, a couple, 2 to 3 months back, when we launched kind of our first hemp webinar series. And you know, it was very well received. And I'm just amazed at how much I've learned between that first presentation and part two of what we're going to talk about. And so, you know, we really are given just a great opportunity to visit with those that use our products, and we get a lot of feedback on you know, things that work or things that could be better. And so it always you know, gives us a chance to improve. But so we'll in this part two of this series, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the industry and kind of what's happened, maybe what happened in 2019 and kind of what's happened so far in 2020. Wanted to spend a little time talking about you know, planting options and really review kind of the concept of direct seeding versus transplanting, and maybe spend a little time talking about clone transplants as well. You know, we'll talk about growing and irrigating the crop and kind of everything that goes along with that. And we'll touch on some of the harvest recommendations and get into a little bit of storage considerations as well.
That's great, Kevin. That's a lot of good stuff. And I just want to remind everybody who's out there today that we do have the Q&A open as well as the webinar chat. So if you do have some questions about what Kevin's talking about or presenting, please put them in the Q&A or the chat, and I will funnel those questions to Kevin as we go along. And if we can't get to all of them, I do know I pass those on to Kevin after, and he's really good about following up. So anyway, please use those. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. You know, last year, 2019 was a very big, you know, opportunity for a lot of growers and for our industry for hemp. There were a lot of people, a lot of states adopted, you know, growing hemp, and there were a lot of growers that took advantage of that. This year we saw a little bit of a recess, kind of a setback of about 9%. And so this year for 2020, we've got about 465,000 acres of hemp planted in the United States. And so this is down about 9% from about 510,000 in 2019.
So Kevin, why do you think we're seeing those declining numbers? What's happening?
Well, I think, I mean, there are a number of things that are going on. I think it's important to start with the end in mind. And I think in some cases, there were a lot of growers that got right into hemp, but really didn't have a home for it and didn't understand exactly what what they were getting into. And so they had a crop. Some had a crop, others, realized that this is a pretty tough crop to manage when you don't have a lot of, chemicals and herbicides available for weed control and pest control. But I think just not, it's not an easy crop to grow, and harvesting, is can be difficult, and not having a home for it, and then with a glut in the market. I think these are all reasons. There were a lot of fields that probably tested above the 0.3% level for THC as well. So you kind of throw all of these things into it, and I think that I think those are reasons why we're seeing a decline in overall. But it's interesting because there's a lot of states that have adopted it and that have increased, and you can see in this this illustration kind of where anything that's green has between, well, anything that's in this light green has between 1 to 10,000 acres. This is 10 to 30,000 acres. Excuse me, the lighter colors 10 to 30,000 acres, and then a lot of these states are more than 30,000 acres. And so I know California, Arizona, and other states have really increased their acreage, while others have probably taken a step back. I know in Oregon, which is probably where I'm most involved with hemp, as far as working with growers. I know that the acres slid quite a bit, and I don't have the exact number, but maybe from 50, 60,000 acres down to probably less than 30. So yeah, lots of things that kind of went into the total acres and kind of what happened, and why some states are up and others are down.
Yeah. So isn't this isn't there an old saying in ag, right? You don't grow it before you sold it. Right? Don't you always want to have your crop sold before you even put it in the ground? And maybe that's not what the hemp growers have been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot that have done that, and I think those individuals were extremely successful. We started this presentation off by talking about those that really made a lot of money, and there's a lot of success stories. I think there were a lot of people that made a lot of money early on, and those people really probably had a good business plan, and they knew what they were getting into, and they understood what their costs were going to be and what some of those obstacles were, and I think most of them probably had a contract lined up, or had a processor to where they could actually process their crop and get that to a finished good. So one thing I wanted to talk about was just, pre-planting. Seed selection is really important in hemp, like it is with any crop. It's important that you're selecting a seed that comes from a good, reputable company. You really want to make sure you have a certificate of analysis. And this is important to really understand the genetics of the seed and what the level of potential level of CBD will be, and also the THC level. It's good to know, from studies what the germ rate is going to be. Make sure that you're selecting a seed that's really conducive to your environment, your growing area. You don't want something that was really bred, for a drier climate and plant it, somewhere on the East Coast where it's, a lot more humid and we get a lot more rain. So these COAs will really identify a lot of these things. They'll identify the terpenes, which is really kind of the flavor, the flavonoids, and a number of other things. The list is too many to include on here. But the reason I bring this up is if you go back a few years, there was a study that found that 70% of the CBD products were actually mislabeled. And so, I think getting off on the right foot, knowing what your seed potential is, I think is extremely important. once you have that seed, it's really important to make sure that you store it in a dry, cool area. Try and avoid any direct light. You don't want any drastic swings in temperature. I think keeping the temps between 40 to 45 degrees. You certainly don't want the seed to freeze. You don't want to store it in a refrigerator or a freezer. That would really create some issues. And I think most seeds do have a shelf life, and I would say that the sooner you procure your seed and plant it, the better. You don't want to hold on to it for years and years. I think it will last a couple of years. You would certainly want to make sure you contact your seed provider and understand what the longevity is on that. But just a few thoughts on seeds as you're procuring them for pre-planting. Another important item is you want to make sure that you have feminized seed. You do not want any male plants in that lot of seed, and this will really reduce the levels of CBD and just really create issues. And we'll talk more about male plants. Again, considering varieties that are going to be good for you for what you want. If you're growing strictly for biomass, or if you're kind of growing for that top shelf flower, you want to make sure that you've got the right variety that's going to lend itself to that. These plants are photosensitive, meaning that they need a certain amount of daylight to stay in a vegetative state before they move into flowering. If you have a shorter growing season, you may want to consider an autoflower variety, which matures a little bit faster. And really, it's kind of daylight neutral. It really doesn't depend on the number of hours of light or the spectrum of light that you're going to get from the sun. I will say it's a trickier plant to grow. It's a little bit more difficult. It always seems like it wants to just kind of go into that flowering stage. And so it certainly wouldn't be for somebody just jumping into hemp. But again, you do want to get a good feminized seed.
So Kevin, are there any of the more popular seed manufacturers selling seed now for hemp, or right? Because I saw that 70% mislabeled. I start to worry about that. How do I know I'm getting the right seed?
There are, yeah, and I think there's an association, a seed association. I don't have that listed, but yeah, I think there's been a lot of progress in the last couple of years, and I know of a few very reputable seed companies that spend a lot of time with the genetics, making sure that their seed is certified and that they are, providing something that's, excellent quality. I think a number of years back, and like with any industry, you're going to have people that come in and maybe, aren't offering a great product. And I think there's a lot of seed that had really, really poor germination rates. Maybe not all of it was feminized, and some of it, may not have really even been CBD seed, and something that out of the gate was going to have more THC level in there. So I can't say enough about getting a COA and finding a good partner with seed, and getting in there early. If you happen to, we're in August, so it might be a little bit difficult to still grow a plant here this year, but even if you wanted to, I think most good seed companies would tell you, hey, we're already sold out. And so getting in early, making a good partnership with one of these companies, and yeah, Richard, there's a number of really good companies across the United States.
One thing's for sure, when I talk to the hemp growers about irrigation, one thing I know is their thirst for knowledge, technical information, it's top notch, and they want it. So and I think the market is reacting to that.
Right. Another thing you want to understand, kind of what the cost of the seed is going to be. And this has come down drastically. I remember a friend of mine planted over 100 acres of hemp just last year, and what he paid for seed was outrageous. And what actually came out of the ground, he actually direct seeded this, and really had a struggle. I think they had about a 40% germ rate, and I want to say they paid close to $10 a seed. I mean, it was really, really expensive. I think now for good feminized seed, you're probably in that 50 cents to $1 per seed. I think autoflowers are going to be more expensive than that, but you know, the seed is not cheap. And you know, there's this, you know, it's not a concept, but kind of a decision. Do you want to take that seed and plant it directly into your field, or do you want to take that seed to a nursery or a greenhouse and have them propagate it and have them kind of, you know, bring it, you know, get it to a certain point to where you can transplant that. In Oregon, you know, people that I've talked to, that's really probably the more popular way to do that is you procure your seed, you find a greenhouse or a nursery, you know, in your area that's close in proximity, and they will grow that seed for you. I think most people will spend about 35 cents per seed is what that charge is going to be for a greenhouse to start that seed, and that includes the plug tray, you know, the soil, all the water, the fertilizer, you know, the light, really from beginning to end to kind of get that plant. It usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks, and then from there, that can be either, you know, planted into a field, which is really the most popular way. I think there's you know, there's a smaller percent that will actually plant it under some kind of a shade house or hoop house. But yeah, that's pretty popular to take that and actually, you know, plant it into the field. And I've got some photos on that. It's really important to make sure that you've got the right size plug. You don't want to grow this plant and it will, you know, grow a tap root, and you don't want to confine that root. I think 3 inches is probably a good depth on that, but you know, you definitely want to make sure you understand the timing as far as from when you're going to get that seed and when it's going to get planted. You don't want to really confine that root to where you know, it gets restricted. And you know, one other thing, you want it planted about a 1/4 inch deep, so just you know, barely under the soil surface. And you want to make sure that you have really good light. Something that can happen if you don't have light, good light, these plants will try and grow towards the light, and they'll actually grow a little bit longer than what they need to, you know, as they're trying to really, you know, obtain that light. And you know, that can they call that stretching, and that can cause problems once that's planted into the field, because it's stretched too far, and the stem just isn't really going to be able to weather you know, the wind and the elements. And so yeah, you want to, you know, make sure that you take that into consideration. We as a company, Jane Irrigation, we've invested pretty heavily in this space with, we've got micro sprinklers, we've got misters, we've got foggers, we've got a whole greenhouse line of products that we deal with. And I know when you're starting your plant in a greenhouse or nursery, you know, very light, frequent applications of water are really a must. It's a balance. You don't want that plant to have too much, you know, leaf water wetness, but you can't not provide enough to where, you know, it begins to wilt and struggle. I will say one of the most critical stages of this process is the germination process, and making sure that you have adequate water. And so you can reach out to me if you're interested. We've got a full line of products that really lend itself to just about any greenhouse or nursery application, depending on, you know, the size of it, you know, what your trays or your benches are. And we have a product manager that can help us design these. And so this is something that we have on a global scale. And so if we've got listeners that are outside of the U.S., we can certainly find ways to provide this information and make sure that we're giving good good information for greenhouse and for nursery water applications. So when you're planting that seed, it's important to kind of understand what what your configuration is going to be. And I just included a simple diagram here. You can see, if you're on a very tight, dense 3x3 type spacing, you're going to be just under 5,000 seeds per acre. And again, just for easy math, if you're paying $1 per seed, and maybe another 35 cents on top of that, you can see, you're going to be you're going to be over $5,000 just in seed. Most operations that I'm familiar with, and again, I'm really speaking strictly for CBD because I know that plant populations for grain and fiber are totally different than this. But most are in that 1,500 to 2,000 seeds per acre, pretty common. I would say kind of that 4x5, 4x6. 4 feet within row, 5 or 6 feet between the row. Again, pretty common. You want to allow enough room for this plant to grow, to branch out. If you're kind of growing just for overall biomass, you probably want to shoot for a goal of at least 10%, a level of 10% CBD. The concentration is going to be quite a bit higher actually in the bud or the flower. And so, I think most growers probably fully expect to be in that 10 to 15% level for CBD. And, that's going to be important, right? As you're coming down to harvest and processing it and just understanding the economics and what the market is going to be. So
Kevin, are these growers using a lot of fertigation with their operations?
They are, absolutely. From when these are getting started in the greenhouse, most greenhouses have a pretty good prescription on what they need to get started in the field. I think growers that have really been successful, they really identified when and how much they need to apply. I know just rough numbers, you need about at least 100 pounds per acre of nitrogen just to get at planting, just to kind of get the crop started. And I think rule of thumb is about another 50 pounds, before flowering. I think it's about, maybe 4 weeks before flowering. You'd certainly want to, reach out to your local fertilizer company or whoever you source your products. I'm sure they have a really good idea. And I'm just talking about the macronutrients. I don't think there's a lot of phosphorus applied. I think there's more potassium, so nitrogen and potassium. And then I'm sure, you can't ignore the micronutrients and what those bring to the table. But yeah, I would really defer to the professionals in that marketplace.
Right. So is this helping people determine, at least predict how big their yields are going to be? Are they able to do that yet?
Yeah, if you can identify, how many plants you're going to put per acre, and you understand how many pounds per plant you're going to get. A lot of the expectation, I think, on average is to get about a pound of dry material per plant. And wet, these are probably 14 to 15 pound stalks is what you're looking at if you were to at harvest pull them out of the ground. After you dry them, again, the goal is to get about a pound per plant. I think is in some cases you're going to get more, and in others you might see a little bit less. But I think rule of thumb, people that I've spoken with said that's probably not too bad to shoot for, is about 1 pound per plant.
Yeah. And then do you need to pre-irrigate before you plant?
Yeah, great question. It absolutely. You really need to make sure that you're going into soil that's got a good moisture level content. here I've got a photo of them, people transplanting. This soil was actually pre-irrigated with drip irrigation. And as they're transplanting, they've got what they call a water wheel. And so it doesn't show it very well on here, but if you want to just, look that up, if you're not familiar with that on a transplanter, I'm not sure I would ever plant anything without a water wheel. And it's a good way to distribute, both water and fertilizer. And it's taking that water from this tank. So the water and fertilizer from this tank is coming down, and there's a wheel that's circulating and pressing down and poking a hole in this plastic, and they're dropping these plugs in. When that's getting that hole's getting pushed down, it's actually putting a little bit of water and a little bit of fertilizer in as well. So yeah, you want to make sure that you have a good pre-irrigation, and then as you're planting, you want to make sure that you've got good soil moisture content.
Do you run into many people, Kevin? This is a question from our audience. Do you run into very many people that use worm castings in their soil mixes here?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know all the specifics, but yes, worm castings, pretty common, way to use more of an organic type fertilizer. You bet. Just a kind of a bird's eye view. Wow. Just kind of wanted people to be able to kind of see. This is plastic mulch. You've got 2 lines of drip tape underneath. You've got the plant that's going in right in the center. And again, the important thing, one of the main takeaways from this slide is I just wanted to show that you want to make sure that you get your plant spacing and density right, that you don't want to go in, so narrow that you can't fit a tractor through there. I know this has happened where, people are looking at trying to maximize, every square foot, and they forget, wait a second, we actually need to get an implement through here to either plant or to harvest. And so you certainly don't want to overlook some of the cultural practices that need to take place. So we talked about just a few slides back, what do most growers do once they have that seedling? Does it go directly into the field like the photo we just saw, or does it go into kind of a hoop house? I would say more than 95% of the acres that are grown are actually grown in the field. There's a smaller percent, and I think that percent's growing. I think there's more growers that are trying to grow in a more in a hoop house. They do this to kind of control the light deprivation and really kind of stimulate flowering. As we talked, that hemp is a photosensitive crop, but this is just a picture. And again, you've got 2 lines of drip tape that are on here. You can't really see it. I guess you can kind of see it down here at the bottom. I would say that if you don't have real good airflow in something like this, I know of some growers that have clipped kind of the bottom, about the bottom 10 inches, bottom foot, and that just creates a little bit more airflow, within this tunnel, and really, I think there's been some studies that show that this is actually a way to increase yield as well.
Yeah, so I want to go from seed to seedling. That's a couple weeks, and maybe I go to the hoop house. What time of year am I going to actually be in the field?
So I think that kind of depends on where you're located, but say for Oregon, you're probably going to want to be planting in the field by June. Would be a good probably good assessment. Maybe if you can get a jump start a little bit before that. I do know that if you start planting in May with the overcast skies in Oregon, it can kind of trick the plant and almost think that it's more of a fall month because you're not getting all the sunlight, and I think it'll think, hey, I need to go out of this vegetative stage and go into a flowering stage. And so you want to be a little careful on getting too much of an early start, but yeah, I think going in late May, early June. I know the later you extend it, the closer that you're going to need to plant your plants just to have good canopy growth, but you're probably going to see a decrease in yields the longer you delay it. I think an autoflower plant is probably an anomaly. I think you can delay the planting, be out a little bit later. It doesn't grow as big, and they're kind of a smaller, more a smaller plant. And
yeah. So Kevin, what you said autoflower? What does that mean? What is an autoflower plant?
An autoflower plant really just means it's day neutral. It doesn't need so many hours or days of light for it to move from a vegetative to a flowering stage. I mean, that's probably the simplest way to explain it. I know it's kind of a premium. It gets a premium. I think it's a more difficult plant to grow, and just because I know that it kind of immediately wants to go into that flowering stage, but that's about as much as I know. I don't know too many growers that have planted the autoflower. I know it's out there, and I know there's probably plenty of acres. I just don't have personal experience with it. It's really important, when we're talking about irrigating, you're probably going to need to budget to have about between 20 to 30 inches of water applied to really grow a successful crop. That seedling vegetative stage, really critical. Kind of those first 6 weeks is important to really kind of get that up to about 30 inches. And you want to do that because you're really, especially if you're not in plastic mulch, you want to really shade out those weeds. And so yeah, 30 inches is pretty important to get to as quickly as possible. We feel that drip irrigation is an excellent way to do that as far as providing water, and both water and fertilizer. And so I feel like it's a great tool to kind of keep that plant and move it along, and get it. Plus, you're going to save water as well. Most of these drip systems, they're designed to be 95% uniform, and so I would just recommend those listening, if you're interested in a drip irrigation system, there's a lot of great qualified irrigation dealers that can help you along. You want to make sure that you've selected a good product from a great reputable manufacturer, such as Jane Irrigation, and that you've got really kind of the right product for the right application. We make 2 products for this, and I just included a few of the common mill thicknesses and spacing and flows. We certainly don't want to tie anyone to a certain a certain flow or a certain spacing. We don't feel that any scenario is really always the same, and so we realize that fields are different and environments are different, and we have just 2 really good standout products. One is a discrete emitter that has individual emitters inserted into the polyethylene, kind of depending. I mean, you name the spacing, and we'll put it in there. And then we have another product that has a continuous line of emitters that just run the entire line of the drip tape, and we can space that anywhere from really 2 inches out to 24 inches. So I don't think there's any spacing, flow, configuration that we can't probably be a part of. So we've invested heavily in these products. One last thing, we do have a pressure compensating product as well that we make in a 20 mil. And so if you've got undulating terrain and nothing's flat, you certainly want to consider using something that's pressure compensating, which really means regardless of the changes in pressure, the flow is going to remain constant. The flow is going to remain the same. This is really important. By the 6th week, it's really important. We talked about feminized seed. You want to make sure that you have all female plants out there. Inevitably, I think you know, nothing is perfect, and I think, you know, there's bound to have male plants, you know, pop up. You can identify these plants at the 6th week, and you look at the node right here, and you can kind of see these bunches, these sacs. To me, when they grow a little bit more, they almost look like a bunch of like a banana bunch, a very small miniature. But they have people that just walk these fields, and they're trying to identify these plants, and they want to get them out as quickly as possible. And you know, they'll pull them out, you know, put them, you know, carefully into a bag. Just if there's pollen in these sacs, they don't want that to break or to spread, and they'll either, you know, burn them or find a way of disposing of them. I know of one grower that will pay his employees $100 per male plant that they find. It's that important for them, and so they're kind of on a bounty to find these male plants. At Jane, we're very interested in seeing if there's a way through ag technology to identify these male plants, and you know, through some kind of satellite imagery. And so if there's growers that are interested in, you know, experimenting in that, we're definitely interested in talking to you and trying to find ways where we can, you know, get to a point where you can pinpoint, you know, where these male plants are, you know, before they get to that 6-week period, so that you can go out and rogue that field and get those eliminated. That's nothing that we offer currently, but it's something that we see as a huge advantage for growers if we can get this figured out. And so if you're interested, we're definitely interested in trying to figure this out, and would love to talk to you. When you look at harvest, you know, the harvest really kind of depends on, you know, are you going to mechanically harvest, or are you going to manually harvest? If you've got a small field, it may not make sense to mechanically harvest. I think there's a lot of people that have hand harvested the entire plants, or they've picked kind of this top layer, these buds, these flowers. But this is just an example of a mechanical harvester that's got a little sickle bar in here, and you've got these heads, and you've got these paddles, and it's basically it's cutting this at about 9 inches from the ground, and it's harvesting the entire plant, putting it on a conveyor belt into a trailer, and then you know, they're taking it from there to dry. So I would say either some kind of a sickle mower or a swather to try and cut at the base of the plant if you're interested in harvesting the whole plant. You want to make sure that you don't harvest you know, too early. You really want to maximize that CBD level. It does plateau at a certain level while the THC will still keep going. So it's a pretty fine balance. You definitely don't want to wait too long to where you've exceeded that level and your crop, you know, needs to be destroyed. So a little bit of a balance. I would say if you're trying to harvest strictly for the flower, I think being on the earlier end of the harvesting spectrum is probably important. If you're going for the entire biomass, I think anywhere from middle to the end of harvest is probably pretty safe. This is just a close-up picture of a bud, and you can kind of see these are little trichomes all around here, and when they turn from a white milky color to more of an amber color, that's a good indication that it's time to harvest, that, you know, your CBD, that you've got high concentrations of CBD. Again, when you look at levels of CBD within a plant, you're always going to have a higher concentration of CBD in the flower itself, in the bud. And you know, I kind of talked about, you probably want to harvest that maybe a little bit earlier. You don't want that to dry down too far. And we talked about, Richard, you asked the question, I think the goal is to get about a pound per plant of dry material. I think that's pretty common.
Yeah, so Kevin, a pound per plant would be great. What's the cost to plant this, on an acre basis?
Um, it probably depends a little bit on plant spacing and how mechanized you want to go and what your labor is. And probably a rule of thumb, you're going to be probably at least $10,000 to $11,000 an acre,
Okay.
and probably go up from there depending on different different things. But I do know labor is a huge part of it, and so if you don't have a good way to control your weed pressure, you're probably going to see it go even further than that. If you're going to hand plant, that's going to be more expensive than mechanically transplanting. So there's some variables that go in. I talked about my friend that grew hemp last year. I think they were into it more than $30,000 an acre.
Yeah, I was thinking about the weeding part of it and how much drudgery that could be and how expensive that could get. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think the cost can really add up. So, once you get the hemp to this stage, you want to make sure that you've got it in a facility that is kind of in that 60 to 70 degree Fahrenheit range. I think you want to be probably no higher than 60% relative humidity. I think that's a good optimal range as you dry this down. And I think most dry downs will take 5 to 7 days if you naturally do this with air drying. There are processors or dryers that can take this and they can process it by the pound. And I don't have the number right in front of me, but I think they can. Well, actually, I do. They can run as much as 2,000 pounds a day as they're running through it. But these are more of a kind of a kiln type operation where they're generating heat and they're going for mass production. So it somewhere in between. You want to take it down to about 10% moisture. If you drop below there, I think you risk probably losing some of those trichomes in the process. I do know of one processor that keeps all of their dust. They just feel like it's that important and that valuable, and so all of the dust that comes out of it, they've got ways to contain that, and they're finding that they've got a lot of CBD levels just in the dust in itself.
A pretty sustainable solution.
Yeah. So that covers pretty much everything I wanted to in part 2. I do just want to put a plug in for part 3 that we're going to dive in a little bit more on kind of the drying. We really want to tackle the economics and understand exactly what the threshold needs to be, given different prices that are in the market. Just to kind of give an understanding, and then hopefully able to talk to some people about successes and what they've been able to do to market their hemp as CBD becomes even more important, and we're seeing it pop up in more and more products everywhere. So we don't have an exact date on that, but please stay tuned. We'll make sure that we get that information sent out to you. I would like to say a big thank you to a few companies that helped provide information. They were a good resource for me to learn from, and so just want to say thanks to TechRain, Oregon CBD, Applegate Farm Solutions, and Hemp Harvest Works. A big thanks and a big help in trying to just put together good quality content. And some of these people we work with on a very close basis, and have used our products and have represented our products very well, and just wanted to say thanks. And I want to just close by putting in a plug. If you go to our website, we actually have a hemp brochure that is very informative, has a lot of information. And if you just want to go to janesusa.com and you want to leave us a message there, or if you want to just download that, I I've got a few copies here myself. If you want to email me, and I could mail you out a printed copy if you'd like a hard copy. But we do have that in a digital form. And Richard, just want to say thanks for letting me take about 45 minutes. And I ran a little bit long, but kind of a lot to talk about. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. And it's me thanking you. This information today was just amazing. Even for somebody who doesn't grow hemp, you know, it's just fascinating to learn about this industry, and the way you explained it was really great. So thanks very much for that. I want to encourage everybody to reach out to Kevin if you need that help. He can help you in many ways in your quest to grow good hemp products. And he's certainly very generous with his time that way. So please, you've got Kevin's email address here, and please use him if you need him. Thank you for attending today. As you know, all our irrigation training sessions are on our website. Feel free to visit those. It's always free to watch those. And I hope everybody has a great weekend. Watch the heat this weekend, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here next week for some more training. Thanks very much, everybody, and thank you again, Kevin.
Thanks, Richard.